The Matt Bloomfield era began with a 0-0 draw at home to Preston North End at Kenilworth Road on Saturday afternoon. Alongside me to look back at the good, the bad and the slightly ugly is the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe. Jimbo, I've just described us two there, really.
Cheers, mate. Speak for yourself.
I'm the good. We'll do all of that right after this intro.
I believe our supporters are the best supporters in the country.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.
Hello again all, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast, the award-winning, longest-running Luton Town podcast, having scooped bronze in the Best Football League podcast category in the Football Content Awards. This season our show is in association with Solid, providing opportunities, provisions and assistance so our academy can fulfil their potential. As I mentioned before the intro, we are looking back at Luton Town 0, Preston North End 0, Matt Bloomfield's first game in charge. And I've got Jimbo alongside me as ever to do that. I'll get your thoughts on the game in a minute, Jimbo, obviously. But wasn't it nice to go to Kenilworth Road yesterday and there'd be a buzz around the ground before kickoff? I spoke to a lot of people yesterday, as I know you did too. There was an excitement in the air just going to the game, and that's not been there for a little while. So that immediately is a positive.
Yeah, smiles on faces. People with a bit more of a pep in their step. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, I had a couple of people come up to me. Thanks for those guys that I spoke to. I saw Mark as well, who was on the podcast a couple of episodes ago. And yeah, that was the general feeling. And that's what you get with a change, isn't it? You get that buzz back. I guess we were all looking for the new manager bounce as well, and really we got it. We didn't get like the full bells and whistles that everyone was after, but there was a bounce. We'll discuss that, but positive, a decent start, a solid start, unspectacular probably, but. You can go back a couple of episodes. I was on there begging, pleading for a boring 0-0. Please. And it's the rot started to crop in at home, and that stopped that. And so yeah, it's a decent start. You probably would have been hoping for more, and that's fine. But the signs of what we saw yesterday are very much something to build on.
Yeah, I would agree. The thing that I really like about it was there's no panic after the game from Matt Bloomfield, and we'll play some of his quotes from the press conference, the post-match press conference, once we've covered the game and things. But he seems comfortable with what he saw yesterday, which is a good thing because, obviously he wouldn't have known quite what to expect. I know he said in the build-up that he's watched a lot of Luton games. I pity him, because I've watched them all and they're not worth watching. But at least he's getting paid to watch them. He watched a lot of Luton games. I think we all knew roughly what to expect from Preston, because Paul Heckingbottom doesn't change his approach for anything. His sides are as boring as they come, and Preston fit that ball very, very well. Even if Sheffield United side with good players were nothing special, they just ground things out. And
well, I mean, I didn't record his post-match because I'm not usually that interested. I'm in the room when it happens and I listen. But he basically just said, well, we've watched what Luton do and how they score. They just go for set pieces and corners. And so they tried to limit that. And it was their job done. But, I don't begrudge Preston that. They can come and stink the place out if they like. And it's not for you to say, well, they should have come and played football so we could have a go at them better. That's not how it works. So they can do what they like, but you wouldn't want to be travelling all the way up from the top end of Lancashire there to watch that, would you?
I mean, they'll accept it because they didn't lose, those fans. But you're right. I mean, if we'd put a goal onto that and they'd gone home empty-handed with an XG of 0.01, and I don't even know where that came from, to be quite honest with you. I mean, surely that shot that nearly cleared the Oak Road in the second half, which was their grand total of shooting output. Surely that doesn't register on the XG scale, because he wasn't scoring if he stood there and done that 100 times.
It must have been someone must have just looked at the goal, and that's a point 0.1 on your XG for you there, lads, because nothing else was happening from their perspective. And I guess that's sort of a part. The sample size that we've seen of that one game is not going to dictate everything that we will finally get or everything we know at the moment, because there's an element of it you can say they came not to lose.
Oh yeah, they definitely
they just came not to lose, and Luton couldn't break them down, and that's fair enough. If you're Preston, you go away with a point, and for Luton you go, well, there's work to be done here.
Yep, I would agree. First team sheet for Matt Bloomfield, 4 changes. Obviously, one was enforced. We knew Lamine Fano wasn't going to be available after his injury at Nottingham Forest. Can't even remember all 4 of them that come in, such has been what's happened in the last week. But Jacob Brown started, Jordan Clark started, Tom Kraus started, and Daiki Hashioka started. They're the 4 that came in. Rue Walters out, Lamine Fano out. Now we really are testing my memory banks. Liam Walsh dropped to the bench, and Zach Nelson was the other one. It wasn't a concussion from the Nottingham Forest game. That was confirmed in the pre-match, but probably hadn't trained all week because of the magnitude of that hit that he took. So that was fair enough. So 4 changes, but the immediate thing, the thing that every single Luton fan was looking at on that team sheet was, please, Lord, tell me there is a back 4 there. And it was an obvious back 4. There was no other way that we, with no Chong or anything like that, we couldn't shoehorn people into a formation that didn't suit or anything like that. It was very much a 4-3-3. Lots of people, we wondered how it would be in front of them. Would it be 4-2-3-1? Would it be how it would work? It was a fluid sort of system in front of them, but Nakamba was definitely behind Clark and Kraus. Brown was definitely wide out on the left. Jones was obviously wide out on the right, and Morris was up front. And at times it was Nakamba behind 2 in midfield. At times it was 2 behind 1. They were fluid, and it was nice to see that we can be fluid. Flexible probably would be the word more than fluid. Flexible. But in that first half, I thought we played some really nice football. When you compare it to what's gone before, we played some nice football without ever allowing them to get in behind us or anything like that. Our structure was good. I liked when players left their positions, someone filled in for them, because we've seen that a lot, haven't we? We've seen centre-backs chasing forwards here, there and everywhere and leaving a space exposed, and we're ruthlessly killed. I saw Luton players pass into each other. 80% pass completion rate yesterday. Now, that's not necessarily anything special in the elite levels of the game, but when Luton have been registering 68% and things like that in recent games, that's a huge marked improvement in just 4 days of training under this guy.
Yeah, all of that stuff. There was a really lot of positive output in the first half. I mean, just to go on the formation, I found it very, very, very interesting because of the fluidity of it. It was so interesting to try and understand what it was. I mean, you probably could say it was a 4-3-3, but at times I was seeing it was a 4-1-2-2-1. But the net result of it at the end was that there were bodies in the middle of the park like we haven't seen before, and so they couldn't get through Luton through the centre like we've seen so many times in the last year, which was refreshing. And that meant even second balls, there was bodies around to challenge for them, and we were getting some decent bounces where they were going to them. And those are momentum changes, small little things that happen, incremental things that happen all over a game, and you just think it's not going to go for you or it is going to go for you, and that was good. Passing, I mean, it's the basics of the game, but so many times 1-2 passes, lose it, or 1-2 passes, launch it long and lose the ball. And it was just they were patient enough to play it around the back, but there was incisive little short passes that broke the lines and got them into more advanced areas of the pitch, which I really liked. But it was more that they could do that at a leisurely pace, but then switch it up and go real quick. And that change, that different dimension of it, just felt like light years away from what we've seen. And I was really buoyed by that.
And the other noticeable thing in that first half, players carried the football. How many times have we seen a Luton player get the football and run into space or drive into space? Not really, but Jordan Clark did it an awful lot yesterday. Tom Krause did it at times as well. And it just creates panic in the opposition defence. And then when you've got the pace of Isaiah Jones, who's also creating panic in the opposition defence, because one time he's going on the outside of that left back, and then when the left back thinks he's on the outside of him, he's got so much speed that he can nip inside him, and once you've lost him, you've lost him. You ain't catching up with him.
Very
the ball's
good in
through
spells,
to him.
wasn't he?
Yeah, ball's through to him. Kind of lacked a little bit yesterday, but I think the one thing we can definitely take from yesterday is we've done an awful lot of work on our shape and our defensive stability. Probably not as much going the other way. And why would you? What was our biggest problem this season under Rob? We couldn't keep the ball out of our net. So anyone worth their salt who was going to come into this club was going to look at the defence before they looked at the attack, and it was eminently obvious that had been the case. The attacking fluidity and flow will come when they start working on it. We've got 2 games left for the rest of this week. Then we have Sheffield Wednesday. Then we have a 10-day break. So from Millwall to Sunderland, we have 1 game in 18 days. I would expect a lot of improvement between those 2 games in particular, because he'll get a lot of time to work on the training ground. I don't know for sure. They might even go away for a week in between that Sheffield Wednesday and Sunderland game, because the weather is not helping with frosts and everything else. In which case, I would expect some significant improvement. But I was really happy with what I saw in that first half in particular. The game kind of fizzled out a little bit in the second. We'll come on to that in a minute. But for the flow and just seeing with my eyes what was different, you could see it. It wasn't like, he said a lot in the pre-match about subtle tweaks, and they probably were to him, but to those of us that have watched Luton all season, they were clear, evident tweaks.
It was like watching a different sport from what we've seen. I don't want to slip into hyperbole there, but it sort of laid bare the issues and how many of them there are that he's got to fix. And really, if you've only got 3 days on the grass, getting that shape and that formation that we've seen working, where they were effective with the ball to a degree that we haven't seen before, probably this season, other than maybe Watford and the Sunderland game, arguably. But then out without the ball, so much more difficult to get through, and that was a major problem. There was rarely any challenge in the midfield for opposition teams just to get through and get at Luton's back line. And consequently, the back line could have had a cigar on. And how many times have you just said that this season? There's always been a mistake in someone. There's always looked shaky, and there was none of that whatsoever. Again, some of that, to what degree were Preston probably trying to push them, but you can only play what's in front of you, and they did that really well. So, in that regard, it was really heartening to see. And if you've got that many problems to fix, obviously leaky in defence, can't score goals, then make sure, and I think most new managers come into a struggling side, they make sure they plug the gaps at the back, because if you're not going to win, don't lose. It's ultimately what we saw in the end of it, wasn't it? So I'm happy with that. It showed that the players that are there can cope with that formation. We've talked about it for umpteen times this year, and when it has been played, we've been encouraged by it. It just wasn't played enough, and ultimately it's led to changes. In the boot room, really. And what we saw against Preston there was the culmination of a small amount of work, but obviously when the bar's been set that low, what we saw was a couple of rungs on your ladder, I'd say.
Well, that's it. I finished the last podcast, the preview podcast, just by saying all we want is a platform of an acceptable level that we can build on. No one was expecting Rome to be built in 3 days as it was, as opposed to a day. No one was expecting that at all. But like you say, from where we've been, we just wanted to be at a level that was clearly above that. And I think it was, certainly defensively. Okay, there's work to do going forward. There was always going to be work to do going forward. That's just the way it is. I don't think we're the finished article in terms of people in those forward positions. I would be surprised if he's earmarked Jacob Brown to play wide left as a regular occurrence. I'm assuming Tahith Chong of the squad that we've got right now would be the one circled to play there, but clearly he's out injured at the moment. And equally, Alfie Doughty will play left back, and I'm even more convinced he'll play left back under Matt Bloomfield than I ever was under Rob, because of the elements of the game that Amari Bell had yesterday. Because I mentioned this a couple of times earlier in the season, when those two games that you mentioned in particular, when Tom Holmes did this. When we're in possession, Tom Holmes at that point, he went and joined Nakamba or whoever the defensive midfielder was to squeeze teams in. Well, yesterday it was Amari Bell who did it. If we were attacking down the right-hand side, which most of the attacks were coming down the right-hand side because Isaiah Jones seemed to have the left back where he wanted him, Amari would just fit in and sit alongside Marv. So if the ball did come out, we're ready to go again and launch that second wave of attack. And there was a lot of second waves of attack yesterday, whereas generally when we lost the ball before, the only second wave of attack was if they've not scored from the first one, they're ready to score from the second one. It really wasn't like that. And also there was a lot of times where when we attacked on the left-hand side, you could tell Amari just clicked into gear. If Jacob was coming inside, Amari would go on the outside. And if Jacob had it wide, Amari would undercut him to go that way. And they're the kind of things that I really think Alfie Doughty will be really, really good at. I really expect Alfie to get a few goals under Matt Bloomfield because he's got a shot on him when the ball comes to him. Amari he's in that part, when he gets to that part of the pitch, he's in that hedging his bets kind of thing, isn't he? Does he shoot? Should he play a pass? Should he just move the ball on kind of thing? It's not a natural thing. Whereas for Alfie up there, he's very natural with it. I think that's going to be a nuance once we get Alfie back in this side that will immediately improve our attacking output.
Yeah, the overlaps and underlaps were really encouraging to see because while there was great passing to work it through the middle, Luton's strengths, well, so far as we know at the moment, who knows what Bloomfield will come up with in the weeks and months, but so far as we know, is the strengths are down the flanks, and that's where most of the chances have come from. Now, the leading chance creator at the point that he got injured hasn't been here for 2 months or 2.5 months, and that's Doughty. So yeah, get him in the side, and it'll be really. I think that's going to be a really good outlet because it was before, but the way that they were interacting with each other is less of a right there you go, Doughty, here's the ball, you go and do it, and more of a okay, if you can't get past a man, there's another man to pass it to and keep the attack going. It's not all just going to fizzle out if they shut down Alfie Doughty, for instance. No, obviously he didn't play yesterday, but you're getting that feeling from the two players that were doing that. And I liked what I saw. There was far more penetration all over the pitch, which suggested that the goals can come from that. Now, obviously, the last bit is getting the goals, and that's going to take not a long time. That's going to take some time, and hopefully it clicks sooner rather than later. But if you're doing what we were doing before, which was, what was the structure? What were we trying to achieve here? How are we trying to go about it? We didn't know. There was far more of a clear plan and a blueprint there. It just needs the final bit, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen yesterday play out a few times this season, but they've played out with a game that was going 0-0, ending up in the back of our net. Just recently, Bristol City away. That could still be 0-0 now if Twine hadn't hit that thing in the top corner, and that's 3 weeks ago. Norwich at home.
Preston at their place.
But yesterday there was none of that. They could still be here now. And even if they wanted to score, which clearly they didn't, I'm not convinced that they would have done. Partnerships. This formation is going to lead itself to partnerships, isn't it? The two left-sided players, let's call it Doughty and Chong. We don't know who it will be. McGuinness and Holmes. Hashi and Jones. And these are partnerships that are in their infancy. Jones has only just arrived, of course. The two centre-backs are only just getting used to playing as a two. Usually they've had a third one alongside them. Krause and Clark would be another partnership. And Morris into whichever one of those two is nearest to him. And that's the other thing about yesterday. Morris was close to footballers. In this previous formation, there's been times where Morris has been in a different county to the rest of his teammates. Yesterday, when we actually got the ball into him with good service, either to his chest or to his feet, he was bringing people into play just with a short pass. And then once the ball goes into Morris, I saw it a couple of times. It didn't come off because the end ball wasn't good. But I saw Morris bring a midfielder into play. And as soon as the ball got to Morris, Jones was on his bike waiting for the ball back to the ball forward to him. that part of it went through to the keeper a couple of times. In fact, there was one where I thought in the second half where I thought Jones was in, but the bounce just flicked it off the pitch just away from him. That's going to come as well. You could see the shoots of these partnerships, and they're only going to strengthen with the more games that we play.
And also that's the pace element that Jones offers you, because if you play with the passing intent that you did there, those nice little bounce passes to try and open up space, which was working, and now you've got the added ability to go quick and direct, but with more purpose to where Jones is. And certainly in the first half, played really well in spells. So, you know, he's not played a lot of football, and he's just had 2 games now for Luton. So that will keep improving. But the threat was there. And obviously when he gets the ball as well, he's not shy at running at a defender. And how many times have we seen that? Not a lot. It was, you know...
It's your sort of player, isn't he?
It's not rocket science, this kind of stuff, is it? But it feels like it, because we just haven't seen that, and you knew that some of them were capable of it, so maybe confidence, but he'll be unburdened by that. He's come from a Middlesbrough side that are relatively flying, albeit he was having to play second fiddle to Ben Doak. So that pace element, likes to stay out wide, which is good. That spreads the pitch and spreads the play. So there's all these different options that weren't existing before. And like I say, that we didn't know what the options were before, other than hoof, and then lose it. And that wasn't what we were seeing. The second half was scrappier. The ref was terrible. That didn't help. You know, and it got a bit dull, and it was obvious that it was probably going to end as a stalemate. So that, you know, it's not perfect, and I'm not saying, well, it was great. It was a great time. You know, if you just turned up for the second half, you probably would have been a bit bored. But there was good
and
stuff.
cold.
Oh, very cold, very cold.
You'd have definitely been cold, yeah. Yeah, there were signs there, and that's all we're looking for right now. Of course, we need to start winning football matches. We've now dropped into the bottom 3. We'll discuss the state of play with the table in a moment. And of course, it's important that we do start winning football matches, but at the same time, it's important that we stop losing football matches as well. And the fact that we've ticked that box off, that's a good thing. If we can then tick it off on Tuesday night and just end that bloody horrible run of away defeats, even if it's another 0-0 draw on Tuesday night, just get something that's not an L on the away ledger.
Well, that's it. The draws have been so few and far between. I looked it up, and Luton had the lowest amount of draws in the whole championship. You couple that with the highest amount of defeats, it's no wonder they're in the bottom 3, regardless of what the other teams did before and during the same time on Saturday. It's like, it doesn't take a genius to work that out. But yeah, if you're not going to win, don't lose. It's simple. You pick up some points and you can start putting it away, and that's what the other teams are starting to do, and they're starting to get points, and that's the worry. But it's when you don't pick up points and you don't pick them up for 4 or 5 games at a stretch, and you just get plunged back into where you were, because we were 15th for a while. You lose 4 games, straight back in the bother. And yeah, it was just a sort of a chess match where nobody was getting anywhere closer to checkmate, really. But there was a lot more to it yesterday, a lot more that you could get your teeth into and see where the direction will be. You know, it's the start of a journey. It's not the end of it. It's not even in the middle yet. So lots to be positive about.
Yeah, there are. The good thing from Matt Bloomfield's point of view is he's also seen what the improvement is, where the improvement is needed. That's a good thing on 2 counts. Transfer window still open. So I would imagine now that he's actually seen it in the flesh and seen what he's got at his disposal, he'll go into the market with a bit more confidence of knowing what he needs, and sort of coming out with what he wants.
It's still difficult, though.
It is.
It's January's difficult. We can all see what we needed there. There's some creativity in the midfield. Very hard to get at any time, let alone on a January.
But when we were approaching January and we still had Rob in charge and everything else, we were worried that we need 7 or 8 positions filling. Well, you look at it yesterday, it's probably only 2 or 3, really, when you think that when you've still got players to come back, and we don't think Alfie's too far away. We haven't heard about Chong, but we don't think he's a million miles away either. His was a hamstring injury at QPR, wasn't it? But he played out the game in that game, so it can't be terribly bad. It might just be one of those that, because of the cold weather, is not exactly, helping matters or whatever. But when those 2 are back, they'll fill 2 of the sort of positions that looked a little less comfortable than some of the other players in positions. But it was just so good watching a Luton team that had 11 round pegs in round holes. Been a while.
It has been a while. And what I also liked as well was when the changes came in the second half, it was all changed at the top line. So the front three, in effect, even though it wasn't a front three, it was a 2 and a 1. They changed, and Woodrow also came on as well. So it's like what he was saying about utilising the squad is what every manager says, but not every manager does. So that's quite positive as well. And regardless of whether you like those players or not, the freshening up of that to try and get what you needed from the game. Ultimately, it didn't happen, but it wasn't never going to happen in months of Sundays with what we were witnessing. But that I liked as well, because it will give confidence to those players that they're going to play, and it wasn't always apparent before.
Yeah, I referenced, didn't I, after when we did the Matt Bloomfield reaction podcast, that I was told in that show that I did with Three Counties that his front three get rotated an awful lot. So I wasn't surprised to see 3 attackers coming on at 75 minutes or whatever, and it'll be interesting to see if those 3 that came on are ever a starting 3, or if he has his starting 3 and those 3 are literally just the, for the want of a better phrase, the finishers of the game as opposed to the starters of the game. Ice hockey fans will be quite used to starters and finishers and things like that, but baseball fans too. But or whether they can get themselves in. If there was a disappointment yesterday, and I'm probably nitpicking here, I'd like to have seen more from Victor Moses with 15. He had 15 minutes to go against a defender who Jones had just run ragged, but we couldn't really get him going. And when we did get him the ball, it didn't really feel to me like he was fully in it.
Yeah, well, the game, I don't think the game was as open's the wrong word, but in Luton's favour as it was in the first half when Isaiah Jones was having that impact. The game had started to fizzle out. The amount of fouls and non-fouls and anything that a wind blew on got a free kick, got the referee blowing his whistle, which was beyond frustrating and isn't the first time with that guy. So I wouldn't necessarily put it on him. I think there was just overall it was a collective sense that this is just going to be a 0-0 here.
Did Tom Holmes win the ball when he got booked?
Yes.
I was going to say, I'm sure from the Kenilworth end it did, but my eyes had icicles forming in them at that point, so I might have been seeing things. But it did look clear to me that he'd won the ball. And then the next thing you know, a yellow card's coming his way, because I really feared we were going to concede from that set piece.
Yeah.
Because obviously they've got some big guns. I think you mentioned a minute ago about Heckingbottom and acknowledging that we score from set pieces. So we basically played anyone on their squad that's 6 foot and above basically got a game yesterday. And I was really worried we were going to concede from that set piece, because full well when they shouldn't be given, they're the ones that are most dangerous. And credit to us for keeping it out. But yeah, it looked like he won the ball cleanly.
Yes, it did. I saw some replays as well. The only thing I can possibly think is that maybe he had his studs raised, but he got the ball. It wasn't over the top of the ball. It wasn't dangerous. It was robust, and the player hit the deck. But if that's a foul, or indeed a yellow card, then the game's gone, because you saw the look of bewilderment on his face, and sometimes players can play act that, but genuinely that was a decent tackle.
What's he supposed to do? Just let him go past him? Can't do that. We've been doing that for the last 4 months. I'm glad he didn't do that. But where are you supposed to go? I didn't think the referee was particularly great. He'd already given Jordan Story a yellow card, and then he takes the foul throw off of him. It took an absolute eternity to take that throw in. He could easily have sent him off there and then. Didn't, bottled that. Quite how the goalkeeper went through the entire game without getting so much as a warning for his time wasting, I've absolutely no idea. But like you say, this isn't the first rodeo of Tim Robinson. At least no one's head got knocked off by Sam Johnston this time, like Jordan Clark at West Brom a few years ago. That's the only positive as far as that referee's concerned. If we ever see him again, it'll be too soon. It really will. That's not to say there are many others that are better. Unfortunately, there aren't.
He seems to be one of the front runners for terrible decisions, though. Just panicky, not really reading the flow of the game, wanting to be the centre of it, stopping any momentum. Just it's not for me.
He'd be a good basketball referee, though, wouldn't he? Because any contact was a foul yesterday, and it's like, mate, seriously, come on, we're all freezing our nays off here. Let them play some football and entertain us at the very least, but not to be. Yeah, the second half did fizzle out a little bit. Kind of understandable in many ways. They were never here to win the game. They were more than happy with their 0-0 draw. You could tell that by the amount of people that were falling down, the amount of time that they took for every goal kick and everything else, and that's fine. That's the way they do things. Not a problem with that. And then, the players that came on found it hard to have an impact in terms of the attacking stage of the game. Probably got to a point where we'd have been happy with a point. Not happy, but content with a point because it stopped the rot, and certainly wouldn't have wanted to have lost his first game in charge. And, we all go home content. So, yeah, probably, happy that we've stopped the rot. I'm certainly happy that I saw a lot of shoots that have been planted in the ground that we can watch grow over the coming weeks. That's the one thing that I wanted. I'm very, very happy that I've watched a Luton team with a structure. Cannot remember the last time I watched a Luton team where the centre-backs weren't chasing someone here, there and everywhere. There was a structure to it. Albeit with the caveat that we're probably going to face greater attacking tests to come. I think that's fair to say. But do you know what? If 2 defenders or 4 defenders need their confidence building and a team wants to come down here and not attack, I'm more than happy for that, to give them a bit of confidence, and we'll see where we go. They'll face a tougher test on Tuesday night. I think that's fair to say. Oxford are unbeaten under Gary Rowett. We'll cover that in the next podcast. But you know what? I'm going there now and I'm thinking, well, maybe we might be able to end this away hoodoo, because at least someone's going to have to work to score against us.
And again, if it does end, I'd be more than happy with a 0-0 to do it. Any sort of draw. That all of that, including this game, represents progress. Now, it's not the 0 to 60 progress that many of us maybe have dreamed about. We can do that. Everybody can dream about these things. You dream of it being the perfect day for a new manager to kick on and do stuff. But I don't remember like a period where it's been this long of people just being a bit disengaged with the football. And that's half of what we heard when we were just walking to the ground anyway, and people coming up to us and speaking to us. And it's going to take a long while to build up, I would suspect, just because even with that feeling, and even with the first half that happened, it was still quite quiet at the ground, and that's understandable, I think.
I think some of that was people kind of intrigued by what they were watching as much as anything else, weren't they? Because it was different. When Jordan Clark passes it to Marvellous Nakamba and then runs to get the ball back off Marvellous Nakamba and the ball hasn't gone 5 yards in between either pass, that's not what we've seen. Usually you offload the pass and you hope that that person pings it into the striker, because someone's got to do it, so that's the instructions. The reason why we had an 80% pass completion yesterday is because we put together an awful lot of shorter passes in our moves, whereas, it's not rocket science, is it? If I pass the ball over a shorter distance, I've got a greater chance of completing it than if I pass the ball over a longer distance. Same as if I throw a stone. Chances are I'm going to be more accurate over 5 yards than if I've got to throw it 50 yards. That's just natural, and that's what that statistic tells us. But sometimes simple statistics just paint how much better or how much clearer the game plan is. And I did get the impression yesterday there was a clear game plan. I got the impression that the players knew what their game plan was, and I got the impression that they could all do it. This formation suits Marvellous Nakamba down to an absolute T.
He played really well. It was sort of Marv back to his best, doesn't it? And I accept people who would say, well, why wasn't he back to his best before? And the argument that came from Rob, wasn't it, that they were still having to manage him back from his knee injury. But then he played that 3-game week for club and country, and you thought he's back, and then didn't really feature. So it was an odd one.
Well, this is the thing. Why does Marvellous Nakamba look better in this formation? Well, there's 3 midfielders as opposed to 2. So his running has gone from 50% of the midfield to 33% of the midfield. So not doing as much running. Hasn't got as much ground to cover because there's more of them to cover that ground. So he's covering less ground, doing less running. Ergo, he's going to look an awful lot better if indeed his knee is still troubling him, if he hasn't got to cover too much of the ground. Literally all this formation needs Marvelous Nakamba to do is stay in front of the two centre-backs. When someone comes and attacks it, nick the ball off of them and give it to Clark or Krause or whoever those 2-8s are. How do we get promoted out of this league? And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting we're going to do that, but I'm just using it as an example. How did we get promoted out of this league? Marvelous Nakamba stopped everything that came through the middle, and he gave the ball to Pelly, or he gave the ball to Jordan Clark, or he gave it to Alfie Doughty or Cody Dramé back in that day and said, go on, lads, I'll stand here and watch you lot go on the attack. And that's exactly what he was doing yesterday. He did it slightly further forward than what he would do under Rob, because the team built up a little bit of confidence in that first half, and we kind of started on the sort of right between the penalty box and the centre circle. And as that first half kind of built, the defence ended up on the edge of the centre circle, and therefore the midfielders was a little bit higher up. And in time, I would imagine that will get even higher up again. But the spaces that they're all covering is a lot less. And if you're not doing as much work, you're not going to get as injured. So this seems to be a win-win situation. The only thing that was lacking yesterday was the goal that would have made it a really, really good day. It still wouldn't have been a perfect day. There would still have been a fair bit of work to do, but at least we'd have had a win to show for our efforts. But I'm still comfortable that what we did get was good enough within that draw to give me encouragement that certainly that we'll stay up. I'm absolutely fine with that. But also encouragement that maybe there isn't quite as much recycling of this squad that's needed as perhaps I thought there was going into January, just because of the difference in formation largely.
Yes, and we were working under the expectation that they were after about 4 or 5 players. Whether that includes Fana, I don't know, but that would seem to be it, and that wouldn't be wholesale changes even that, but it would be a good chunk of new players if they'd managed to get the full complement, even though probably by the looks of it at the moment you're not going to see Makoso anytime soon. But yeah, I don't think that there's huge right now it doesn't feel like the huge rebuilding job almost, but it's just the simple stuff, and I'm more than happy to be kept in hindsight on this, but it just makes you wonder why the hell persisted so long with a 3 centre-half defensive setup when it detracted so much from every other aspect of Luton's play, particularly in going forward states and the stuff you've just mentioned about Nakamba. And it's baffling. Obviously, that's changed now, so we have to look forward and move forward with it. But the other teams now starting to win. Cardiff absolutely thumping Swansea.
They are starting to get right on my nerves, Swansea.
I think that's extenuating circumstances there. I think that was a emotional game for Cardiff because it was at home. Omar Reza's dad had just passed away. Local derby will remain to be seen whether they can maintain that. The shock one for me was the Portsmouth one against Middlesbrough. But it does show that if you get a plan of action right, and even if you're down the bottom, you can beat teams like Middlesbrough who are riding high. So there is hope. It's just that I understand that people would say, but yeah, they're all winning as well now, and so we have to start matching their result and bettering them, which means you have to go on a run of 3, 4, 5 games to get out of it, and the evidence so far has not suggested that that's possible. But we don't really know what's possible at the moment because we're just feeling out this new era. But the early signs are that there's going to be a lot more of a roadmap to getting there, whereas before we're like we didn't have a map at all.
Nice sat nav had gone pear-shaped on us, hadn't it? It run out of batteries. Yeah, I agree. Look, we are still in trouble. Still a 2-game league, though. You put 2 results, even the position that we're in now, you put 2 results together, we're going to be 15th, 16th, or wherever it may be. I think we can go 17th or 18th just by winning on Tuesday, for example. And then, of course, we'll play early on Saturday. So were we to come away with a win at Oxford, and again, this away form isn't going to continue forever. It will turn around, and, who's to say it won't turn around on Tuesday? If we were to put 2 wins together, then, the picture looks much different in much the same way that it looked very different after we lost those 2 games over Christmas. As you mentioned, we went from 15th to 20th in no time at all. You can go from 23rd to 18th in no time at all. Still wouldn't be good enough. We still want to be higher up the table. But yeah, I think what I saw yesterday is that the rebuild to get us safe isn't as large as I thought it was, but there will still need to be a rebuild in the summer. I'm not convinced that we've got the full qualities that a Matt Bloomfield starting 11 would want.
No, I don't think
I mean,
so.
it's lacking pace. Yeah, okay, it's got Isaiah Jones, but I would imagine a lot of his team have pace in it, not just 1 or 2. You're talking 5, 6, maybe even more than that. And then it's lacking creativity. I think we can get out of this mess with the relative creativity that we've got. Once you put Chong back in that side, he will create things. Alfie will create things. So in the summer, I think there is more where more of our transfer business is done anyway. I think there'll be a bigger outlook on those 2 things in particular, pace and creativity. But I think, we've got enough within the building with a couple more additions that we're still expecting to make up that 4 and 5 to get our heads out of trouble. And ultimately this season, that's all it's about now. Anything else is, pie in the sky. Even top half is pie in the sky. Your ceiling now is probably 15th, something along those lines. But you've got to make sure your trapdoor is no lower than sort of 20th. If you get comfortable in those positions and we can see the season out, then that's fine. If we can get slightly higher than that ceiling, then that'll be fantastic. But, I don't see that now, just because whilst I think we're going to get somewhere where I'd like us to be, it's going to take time to get us. I don't see us suddenly putting in a burst of 7 or 8 results, for example. I think, I would, over an 8-game period, I would expect something like, I don't know, 3-2-3, 3-3-2, something like that in terms of mixed ways of results. An inconsistency with some wins, but, some struggles along the way, just whilst we're sort of working everything out. Albeit, as I said earlier in the podcast, that 18 days between Millwall and Sunderland, that as much as we wouldn't have minded playing that Plymouth game were we to have won it, might not be the worst thing in the world that we're not playing that game, just to give him a little bit of an extended period, like Rob had when he first came in, just to really work on the training ground or wherever it is that they do that, and come out for that Sunderland game. And that's a big week, isn't it? Sunderland, Sheffield United, Watford, 2 weeks or whatever it is, that we can go into that in a much further forward position than what we are now.
Yeah, people forget that Rob had the World Cup break, didn't he, in Qatar, where that was being played, so to get his side sort of ready. And
there's lots of sort of things around that World Cup that's still being linked now, because I understand that the new boss met up with England's World Cup boss for a lunch.
yeah, he did.
You can kind of see that as well, can't you? Because there was a lot of Morris movements yesterday that reminded me a lot of Harry Kane's movements during the World Cup, coming deep and then letting a wide right pacey guy go on in further forward. I mean, if you were thinking of it as England in the World Cup, it would have been Kane to Bellingham to Saka. I mean, obviously we weren't playing on those levels, but do you know what I mean? Then personnel on the pitch, it was very similar, wasn't it? Morris comes shorter to open up more space for Isaiah Jones in behind. So you can kind of see why he would have sought out Gareth Southgate if they're the kind of tactics that he was using.
Yeah, I hope he's a bit more flexible than Gareth.
Yeah, and
Southgate
doesn't bother
became.
dropping into a 3 at the back like Gareth did either.
I think it was more, the way he was describing it was more the leadership and ambassadorial role that Gareth Southgate changed. He's changed the England national side for the better from that front, brought fans closer to the England national side and to the players, and also the press closer, because there was never an easy relationship with the national press and the England.
Well, he's got you in the palm of his hands already, hasn't he, with his quiff?
Yeah, no comment, Your Honour. No. Damn. One other point on the creativity stakes that are already in the building, which I was positive about, or buoyed about, even though he started on the bench, was Zach Nelson. Now, in the pre-match for the Preston game, he was talking about Zach Nelson very glowingly, nice big smile on his face, saying he's not quite sure they know his best role yet, but it could be just behind that striker in the 10, which is something you highlighted from his early days this season, that could be his eventual place. And I could see that from what he did in the previous 2 games, albeit under a different manager and then the caretaker. And I think that there could be something in that. And so I'll be looking forward to seeing how that develops.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, there's a lot of things he said in that pre-match that made me wonder if he'd been listening to us for the last 2 or 3 months. I'm sure he hasn't. But if you are listening, Matt, great first job. Work to build on, but we're comfortable with what we saw yesterday. Speaking of Matt, I think it's high time that we heard from the man himself. James was in his post-match press conference where a number of questions were asked of Matt, largely around whether he liked what he saw and just the intricacies of what he saw. And, well, here's what he had to say to the press guys.
Given the results before this game, 5 losses on the bounce, and draws have actually been quite hard to come by for Luton. The lowest amount in the championship, so it's either been boom or more often bust. So does that represent progress?
I think it has to, yeah. I think if you look at the discipline out of possession and the way we restricted our opposition to any kind of goal scoring opportunities, I think to win games of football you have to have your goals against column low. So that needed to be addressed, and that's needs more work on it, absolutely. Like I say, there's been 5 defeats in a row, so we needed to try and turn the tide a little bit. And like I say, in terms of the way the boys have, the freshness with which they've been this week and the way they've implemented our work, the work that they've done has been very pleasing. And it's going to be an ongoing process to get to the final product. We understand that. We want to score goals. We want to get forward as much as we possibly can, absolutely. But like I say, I'm repeating myself slightly, and I apologise for that. In terms of a foundation, I think it's a good start.
It's the hardest thing to score goals, though, isn't it? So, you've worked on one side of it, and that's come off quite well, but the other side is the difficult part.
Yeah, that's why the strikers get paid the most money, I guess. That's the hardest bit on the pitch, to score a goal. And we have to build the confidence and create more opportunities for our forward players in all areas and all aspects. I think there's times, as I said earlier on, there's times that we could have put the ball at risk more and been slightly more direct at times today. But yeah, that all comes with times. That understanding and that synchronicity throughout the group comes with more and more work, and we'll have to work hard to get there as quickly as we possibly can.
More possession than we've seen quite often this season at Cunliffe, I think 61%. Obviously, it's what you do with it, I suppose.
Absolutely.
That's another thing that gives you foundation.
Yeah, I think that again, my team's we don't go after possession as a percentage. We don't go after dominating that for the sake of it. We go after having the ball to get to the top of the pitch and try and create opportunities. That's what and if we can go there in 2 passes, let's go in 2 passes. If we need to go take 4, 5 and 6, we'll take 4, 5 and 6. It's not about trying to be possession dominant as such. It's about trying to create goal-scoring opportunities. And like I say, so maybe we turned out and kept possession at times when we could have put the ball at risk. That's the one we need to go back on slightly and really go and try and attack. But like I say, the boys have taken on a lot of information in 3 days. They've taken out on a huge amount of information. And we tried to get that balance right between overloading them and giving them as much as they need. And they've taken it on. So yeah, I think that there's definitely plenty to work on, but I don't want to be downbeat. I think a point is a step in the right direction, and coming off the results as they have been and the goals against that they have been, I think we have to say that that's a positive coming out of it with a clean sheet.
He does talk very, very well, doesn't he, Matt Bloomfield? Kind of reminds me of Rob in that sense. They both arrived when they were 40 years old. They've kind of got that youthful outlook to proceedings, for the want of a better phrase. But you can tell he's been winning games of football. There's a calmness to him. Even though yesterday wasn't perfect, as he alluded to himself, he'd love to goal on top of it and things like that. But he was content with what he'd been working on. And he just strikes me. I mean, I've said on this podcast for 6, 7, 8 episodes that this team needs a new voice. This fan base definitely needed a new voice. And I'm liking what I'm hearing.
Yeah, he does seem and come across as a very confident and likeable guy. And that is good. I mean, I've been around a lot of Luton managers in my time, and luckily the last 4 or 5 have all been really good blokes. I mean, you're going back into the mist of time, but there's certainly a couple of them.
We won't name names.
I won't name them, but they were bloody hard work. Really, you could probably guess, can't you? But yeah, this is the new profile that they've been going for since, well, Nathan really, wasn't he? Because John Steele was the exception there. They chose a non-league promotion specialist to do the business, and he did. He started the rebuild, but then Jones took it on. All the other ones since, and even though it didn't work out for him on the pitch, Graham Jones was a affable guy that I got on with. So I think that's important, because it's all this talk about culture and building relationships with fans and players and stuff, and they had been stretched. That's undeniable. So to get that back will take a while. Obviously, it will be helped by victories as it always does. But the early signs are good, and his the clarity in what he's saying and speaking about seemed evident on Saturday, and I think that's the main thing.
And that's exactly what we said, wasn't it, in the preview, that we got the impression that players are going to know their roles. Whether they're good enough to perform them roles, that's to be determined over the course of time. But they're not going to be clouded with what their role is. And we kind of got the impression that a few players were clouded in what they were meant to do, particularly when we didn't have the ball. Am I meant to be here? Am I meant to be there? Who am I meant to chase? Who am I not meant to chase? Where's my position? And it just ended up in a bloody mess, didn't it? But not yesterday. Everyone knew who their person was. Everyone knew where their area was. Everyone knew that if someone went, I'm the man who's got to cover. There was one time, wasn't there, where we defended a corner, where we ended up, because Bell was defending it on the other side of the box to where a left-back would play. Hashioka ended up at left-back because he was defending on that side. They didn't just, run over and get back into their positions while Preston was still attacking. They just stayed where they were, waited for the time to come where we had the ball, and then they swapped themselves over. So they kind of knew... Just something as simple as that to us football fans watching on seems quite obvious, and you would like to think for the players it would seem obvious, but it hadn't been. Just something like that was quite obvious and quite noticeable, because it was a good probably 90 seconds to 2 minutes before they actually had the opportunity to switch back again. But no one was getting sort of rattled that we were seeing Hashi at left back, like, oh, what the bloody hell is he doing at left back sort of thing. Everyone was kind of just watching to see how it played out, and actually when they swapped back and it all made perfect sense, having seen the complete picture, that you're like, wow, that's something we've not seen for a long time.
Yeah, and I think that the fact he's new to the players and only been there for 3 or 4 days at the point the game happened means I think you can be more objective about what their talents are. And he did say he'd gone back and watched videos of previous games and stuff like that, and maybe even some at previous clubs to assess what the players were. So, and I think when you're a new guy in a new role, you get to be more objective about that, a bit more clinical about where they are currently as how they can help you. So that's another part of the new voice aspect, isn't it? Because Rob loved the club, he loved the players, and he saw all the good in them, and that's not a fault in anyone really. I think the world needs more of that, but obviously that could, and it's just a theory, so I'm not saying it is, but that could cloud decisions, cloud the relationships and how things went. Don't know, but that's the sort of things that, when you're out from the outside, you sort of suspect, don't you? And the new voice aspect, I think it just wipes the slate clean, calms it down, and says, right, this is the job you need to do now. None of that stuff before. Hopefully.
You always need to have the potential of being a bad cop as a leader, don't you? Even if you don't ever bring it out, you always have to know that the people that you're leading are aware that you can be that. If you ever get to the stage where it's all too pally-pally, then people start taking advantage and exploiting it, don't they? And I don't know if that's the case. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that it is, but the perception is always as much as the reality, isn't it? And maybe that was the perception of it, but that doesn't appear to be the case here right now. And yeah, I was enthused by what I saw, Jimbo. I really was. You know, whilst acknowledging it wasn't perfect, there are tougher tests to come, and all of that. From what I've seen recently, there was a lot of encouragement there. Obviously, we focused an awful lot on the defensive side of things here, because that was clear that was largely what had been worked on. But even based on the last league game that we played in this formation, could have conceded 10. You know, that's against the QPR side who we made look a lot better than what they are. I know they won again yesterday, but they only beat Plymouth 1-0. Plymouth conceding goals left, right and centre as well. They're not as good as we made them look on the night. It was complete night and day defensively from that. And to go from that in such a short space of time, when we do start working on the attacking play, and that's probably going to be until the end of this week, because how does it work? So presumably on Sunday they come in for a little bit of a light training session after a game. Then maybe on Monday they'll go through some tactical elements of Oxford, maybe do a light session on Tuesday morning. I don't know exactly when they travel, and then they've got a game. So they've not got a great deal of time to work on any attacking play anyway. It's your first away game, having lost 10 on the trot. I suspect the intensity is going to be around keeping things tight, being hard to beat. Of course, Matt Bloomfield will want to win on Tuesday. He'll want to win probably more than Luton fans will, given that his affinities to Wickham, who are rivals of Oxford. But once we do start working on that attacking play, if he can make the defence as improved as that within 4 days, it shouldn't take too much time to start seeing the wheels in motion once the attacking play does start coming round.
Yeah, that would be the hope. You know, the other element of goal scoring and creating chances is confidence, isn't it? And it's clear that the confidence has been knocked, but that will start to change with the new regime, the new ideas, and then obviously getting results. And a result from where we were was a point. They got a point, and the defence will be happy because they got a clean sheet. Now the attack could be looking at themselves. How can they improve? But that sort of stuff, it's small elements on the road to where you want to be, isn't it? And hopefully that will be the case. I'd be more than happy to go to Oxford with a keep it tight mentality and see what you can get, because you get 2 draws in a row for this club and this season, how it's gone, then you're starting to tick along nicely then. You might not be out of the bottom 3 at that point with just a draw, but it's almost not about that in the moment, even though you've got to keep one eye on it. It's about building some momentum, building some confidence, and seeing where that can take you. Because I think we're all still of the belief that this is salvageable. It's not. It's nowhere near dire straits at the moment. But you know, you've got to see that happening before your eyes, and we hadn't been.
Yeah, exactly that. So you're kind of comfortable with what you saw yesterday?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, there was good stuff, positive stuff that we haven't seen for a long time.
That you'd like to see natural improvement on, which you'll get?
Yeah, a clear plan. You could see what they've worked on, some structure. The out-of-possession stuff was encouraging because, my God, how many times have we, chewing our nails when teams were just waltzing through the centre of Luton, and that wasn't there against Preston. So that was all good. And, yeah, we'd all want to see goals. We'd all want to see Luton pressing and getting that last 10 minutes going and getting the Kenny rocking and scoring a goal. And I'm sure that will come. It will come. But for starters, it was a decent, solid afternoon. But again, unspectacular.
It was unspectacular, yeah. Luton managers, for some reason, they don't start with wins. I think he's now the 8th one who hasn't started with a win, and they've not all been bad, have they? So, it's not a bad starting point. I think that was the first 0-0 draw at home since Hull City in the last regular season game the last time we were in the Championship. So
so totally unused to that scenario then, yeah. I was thinking back to it, that I hadn't seen a game like that for a long time. It was kind of unusual, uncharted territory for a while, wasn't it? Like I say, I'll be gobbling up a 0-0 if you offered it to me.
Yep, I stress that's at home. before everyone shouts at me that we drew 0-0 at Portsmouth earlier on in the season. Well aware of it. I was there. Remember it well. That's pretty much it for this episode of the podcast. We didn't see 0-0 coming, did we? And no one else out there saw 0-0 coming either, because there were no correct score answers for that game. Most people were picking a Luton win, though, which was encouraging. It kind of showed you the impact that just having a new manager had on the fan base.
You'd be a lunatic if you,
you would, yeah.
were predicting a
I
clean
could
sheet. An absolute lunatic.
Yeah, you really would, yeah. I mean, there were a few, 2-0s, 3-0s and things like that. But no 0-0s, and I'm not surprised. As I say, last one, you have to go back to May 2023 at home for the last one. And here we are in January 2025. That's how rare they are. So, and hopefully they stay rare, because hopefully we start putting some goals on the board.
So that's me still well ahead of you in the score prediction stakes.
It is, yeah, but I think we're going to start winning some away games, so I'll catch up, mate.
Yeah.
Don't you worry about that. I'll catch up when you're still going down we're going to lose and all this malarkey.
I know, this dawning of a new era, that I'm going to have to pick my scores a little bit more carefully now, and with a little bit more
positivity.
Hey, it was reality, and listen, we were all there, we all saw it. That was the reality, and more often than not, it was correct. But hopefully, not for much longer.
Indeed, so yeah. Thanks for all of your comments, everyone that got in touch with us regarding our reaction to Matt Bloomfield being appointed. We tried to give as much sort of insight into the new guy as possible, because, like us, I dare say a lot of people haven't been watching Wycombe very often, and a lot of what we sort of expected based on his Wycombe side, we saw the sort of fruits of his labour yesterday. The left back going forward in particular, like I referenced, the front three being rotated, things like that. These are all common occurrences at Wycombe, and I expect those to continue. So yeah, thanks to everyone for your comments. Thanks for watching or listening to the podcast, however it is that you consume this podcast. We will do a leaderboard update with the correct scores after the Oxford game, as there wasn't one. I've been a little bit short of time since full time yesterday. So we'll get that sorted after the Oxford game for you, but there isn't a great deal of movement at the top of the leaderboard, I wouldn't think, because only a few of you went for a draw as well. That is pretty much it for this episode of the podcast. Once again, they're going to come thick and fast this week. We've obviously got a midweek game. We've got a Saturday game as well. So if you don't want to miss any of the content that we put out, do please subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast from. You'll get a notification as soon as they drop. And as I say, they'll be dropping quite regularly. We're delighted to be over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, heading towards 2,100 subscribers quite quickly, actually. So thanks to everyone who subscribed in recent days. If you know someone who listens but hasn't subscribed, give them a nudge in the right direction for us. It'll help them as much as it helps us.
Put it in the old WhatsApp groups. If not, tell them to get on board.
And we'd be really, really grateful. As we are to the Barber Club and the Lower Level in Luton for hosting our studio as always, to Sean Grant and the Wolfgang for our intro music, and to Ed Smith Creative for all the designs that you see on set. Till next time, which will be a preview of the first away game under Matt Bloomfield, from Jimbo and myself. It was a whole lot more organised, wasn't it?
I believe our supporters are the best supporters in the country.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.